I'm Gogo Diego, host of the Macrocosm podcast, and I'm a Move skeptic.
I'm Rushi Journey, one of the co-founders of Movement, and I'm a Move maxi.
Move is the hot new alternative VM, but is it any good or is it all just hype? Is it really more secure? Is it that much better than Solana's SVM? What do the ecosystem tooling and applications look like? Is Move fragmentation a problem with how many different versions there are? And is Move an overhyped, dead Facebook project? I am a Move skeptic, and to be honest, a little bit of a hater, and Rushi in this episode is going to try to convince me otherwise. So let's get to it. So why should anyone care about Move?
Let's start with, I think you're a Cosmos guy. You've been writing CosmWasm and Rust. I think everyone that's a developer acknowledges that Solidity isn't the best. ERC20 isn't the best. Solidity compilation isn't the best. Talking about vanilla EVM, obviously there's like parallelized EVMs and enhancements, but the traditional EVM for majority of EVM L2s are slow, clunky, very insecure. There's over $4.5 billion lost every year in some variety of hacks. A good portion of these are like integer overflows, re-ancestry, just not being able to manage resources properly. I was a Solidity developer. I also was a CosmWasm developer. And to be honest, I wasn't the best Solidity developer. I would say like the EVM had a place and still has a place for really talented developers to build cool stuff. But for the average new developer to come to the space and go to 0 to 1, it's very, very difficult. So Move was built by Facebook and the Libra project to be the gateway between like crypto development and traditional developers, where if you're a new developer, for example, you'll have formal verification runtime. So let's say, for example, it's an integer overflow that you've written in Solidity that gets compiled and exists on the Ethereum mainnet, get exploited. That same integer overflow gets caught at runtime by the prover and checks for resource type memory safety. And then beyond that, I would say, like, for example, you have a linear typing, so some of the double spend issues that we see aren't possible. And generally, you have a lot of asset control, which I'll get more into. But TLDR, very, very secure programming, so that it's like idiot proof almost. And then obviously, you have high throughput execution with parallelization and block SCM and whatnot.
Yeah, so I'm going to come at it as a Move skeptic because I am, but
Yep.
every other smart contracting language is secure. I think Solidity is the only one because it was the first. So what do you have to
Yep.
say if, comparing Move with the new alt VMs in town, Fuel, CosmWasm, all these other new guys? Because is Move more secure or than these new VMs?
So let me take a step back. I think that Rust-based programming, and I think that's where we're all in, is the future, right? You had like original like Solidity-based programming, which I think everyone in the industry is like, okay, this is bad. We have new. CosmWasm is a variant of Rust. SVM is a variant of Rust. It kind of is Rust, but Anchor is a different framework. Fuel is like Sway, which is like similar to Move. So I think the general industry consensus for alt VM space is Rust-based programming is safer, faster, and more secure. I think Move puts a lot of emphasis on formal verification. I would say, like, take a step back. Like, generally, all these Rust-based programming languages are much more secure than Solidity. I'm an advocate of CosmWasm, Sway, etc. I think one thing that I'm really focused on is bytecode verification at runtime and formal verification runtime. So, for example, the extra layer of security, if you will, is with this like bytecode verifier that exists in the VM that checks for type memory safety. So, for example, there's this borrowing checking scheme which allows for only one mutable reference at a given time. So, to get more technical, it's like the bytecode verifier ensures the global storage is tree based, like Merkle, and not graph based. Graph based storage systems unstable and complicated, but Move Prover essentially is very stringent and make sure that when there's untrusted code or code that isn't the best, it'll make sure that, hey, there's multiple mutable references. There is type and memory safety. And then going beyond that, we have like the Move Prover, which does like a backend solver. So essentially every Move code gets compiled down to like ZG solvers and checks like, hey, is there like integer leaks? Is there memory leaks? Is there other issues that we see? And I think from a developer point of view, you have flexibility. So say, for example, writing a yield vault product. Right now, in Solidity, permissions is kind of difficult to manage. With Move, you can essentially build modules for users on this yield product and be like, only enable the funds to be withdrawn when this transaction is signed. So each module can be paired with access control modules so that you can essentially restrict who's coming in and who's coming out. You have like invariants, post conditions, and you have like a rich standard library to
Hmm.
help support. So TLDR, I think it's like Rust itself is pretty good, but Move itself focuses a lot more on like intermediate verification and checking for security.
But that's not exactly specific to Move? Are you aware of CosmWasm or other frameworks having also these sort of security measures?
So I've been deep, like I was roughly playing around with CosmWasm. I don't know to what extent CosmWasm does security. I know it's Rust based and inherits some of the benefits, but again, the benefit isn't in the language itself. I would say like, if you just took Move and put it on Solana, it wouldn't be the best. Which is why I'm actually like, I kind of advocated for don't do Move on Solana. It doesn't make much sense. The benefit is from the VM itself. So like the Move Prover, which is one of the best formal verification tools on the planet is actually some of the secret sauce. The language itself is pretty arbitrary, I'd say.
Hmm. Because I feel like all of the Rust programming languages are pretty strict, very safe. And so I'm not sure
Yep.
if just claiming security whenever Solidity is like not good whatsoever for that is like a good distinction for Move. Also, I guess we talk about now Solidity is more secure. Now we have, more sort of measures for that. Could you just talk on that? Do you think Solidity is still secure with these new tooling?
Again, on your first point, I would say like the language itself is like all Rust-based programming is very, very good. I'd say like Solana rarely has smart contract hacks. Like I can't remember the last time anyone hacked Cosmos, but to be honest, like there's not much there these days. But I would say like Rust-based programming is the future. We're all here. The main benefit of Move and why I show Move is the VM itself. I believe the Move VM is the best execution layer in terms of throughput, in terms of the Move prover that brings security, and Move language is just like a cherry on top per se. But I would agree that like if you put CosmWasm on the Move prover or you put like Sway on the Move prover, it wouldn't be like like the end of the world. Um, not to your point that Solidity is getting better. I wouldn't say that Solidity is getting better. I would say like EVM tooling is getting better. So, for example, Arbitrum, they disabled registry with like they have this stylus module, and Arbitrum engineering team is like one of the best on the planet, like very very talented. So I think there's ways you can get around the issues of EVM Solidity, but that's mostly just DevX, which it's like kind of a workaround solution, but ultimately there will always be gaps. The main like thesis is if you're writing Solidity code right now, there's nothing stopping. There's no firewall basically, right? If you write bad Solidity code today, no matter what kind of trinkets or bells you put on it, there's nothing stopping it from getting exploited, getting checked at. There's no one look. There's essentially no monitoring of the code. Obviously, you have like hacker like auditing tools that people do externally, but the VM itself doesn't have that. Whereas Move and some other iterations have that at runtime.
Yeah, so I think that was really good. I guess now let's talk about sort of throughput and sort of these new sort of comparing the parallelization of sort of fuel versus the basically these new VMs. Sort of
Yep.
are there any more clear benefits to? Or are they all just like parallelized? Is there any better
Yeah,
parallelized VMs?
I'm pretty like I think it's actually good, right? We're entering this era where changes are pretty fast. You have like billion parallel EVMs. You have like a bunch of SVMs. You have Move VMs. You have Fuel VMs. You have I don't know if CosmWasm has gotten to point. I don't think it's there yet, but anyways, my point is there's a bunch of high throughput execution, and it's very like, does anyone really care about 10K versus 12K TPS versus 14K TPS? I don't think that's something to discuss right now. I think Solana's barely hitting 2K, 3K in production, and Solana's obviously crushing it in terms of adoption. So I think the TPS number game is kind of cooked right now, and we kind of got there. I think what's important is DevX. So the main takeaway with Move is block STM, which is optimistic parallelization. Monad, and I'm not sure if Fuel does this or not, but I know Monad is inspiration of DM BFT. Where the biggest issue with Solana right now is that if you're doing, say, thousands of transactions, the scheduler was broken. I think there's a new update coming up, but it's very difficult to manage conflicts and state transitions between different transactions. It's on a developer, which is why people say like the Solana DevX is rather poor. Vanilla Solana, I'm sure there's like enhancements from other folks. Whereas Move has optimistic parallelization. So essentially, when you execute dozens of transactions, it handles it for you with block STM itself. So it makes like the DevX a lot easier. You don't have to worry about how you manage collisions and how do you manage like the execution layer. You just build your app. But again, I think like the marginal difference between like Move VM, SVM, Fuel VM isn't that much in terms of speed. I think it's Move VM, SVM. I'm not really sure how Fuel. I think Fuel VM has like 600 TPS right now in mainnet, which I'm not really sure in too much architecture, but I think Move and SVM are pretty neck and neck.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Now, I guess we're going to talk now around the ecosystem because
Yep.
we already talked about security. Parallelization is roughly the same, but now the ecosystem and its tooling. So, Move is, I wouldn't say it's like a super young language, but it's definitely not as mature as the SVM. So, like,
Yep.
do you think, first of all, the tooling is as good as the SVM?
No, and that's by design. So Move has been live for a year and three quarters. Like after we went live like 2 years ago, I'd say. Solana's been obviously around for I think maybe it was like 2020, something like that. So it's been around for a while. But if you look at the numbers, Move developer growth has skyrocketed. Monthly active developers last year, which was the first year, it was 3%. This year, it's 7.6%. Next year, it's going to hit 13.2%. Solana developers are also growing. Obviously, it's the go-to platform for like majority of volume these days. Um, I would say that the trend that we're seeing is like the best analogies. I'm not sure if you're Web2 dev or whoever's watching the Web2 dev. Like you had PHP and Ruby, which were like the first original Web2 languages for websites, and then you had JavaScript with React and Vue come to life. The same thing with Solidity, where Solidity is like the PHP Ruby. Obviously, Aave, Uniswap, Curve, the Blue Chip DeFi will always be home to Solidity. But then when we look at apps that my mom will use, my friends will use, fully on-chain games, DeFi, whatever you want to call it, needs high throughput and secure execution. So that's like the Rust-based programming is like JavaScript programming, and then you have two libraries like React and Vue, which is like Move and SVM. So I would say like from a dev point of view, it really comes down to what ecosystem and chain you want to build on, as well as like kind of what's more convenient for you. I think the end game is that both coexist. Like if you go on React and Vue right now, the numbers are pretty similar. I think React is a lot more, like I would say 30% more, but still very, very good developer tools. And that's kind of the end game for Move SVM.
Yeah, and so the tooling not as good, but the applications it unlocks is essentially better. Is that your argument?
Wait, sorry, I think cut out a little bit. Sorry.
No. So the tooling is not as good, but the uh
Yeah.
the applications that it unlocks is sort of is worth
The
that.
tooling
Is
is
that your
not
argument?
good today, but it's on track to become really good tomorrow.
Hmm.
So Move VM growth has outpaced like in the first 2 years than SVM growth. And the bet is you have two large layer ones and us coming to market and a bunch of other Move VMs like Inisha, Nexio, etc. They're all pushing forward Move infrastructure. So today it's not going to be as good as DevX on Solana, but then you can make the same argument for Solana. Solana's DevX isn't as good as Ethereum's. So any new incumbent blockchain ecosystem will never have the same good DevX, but it's about rate of growth. So I would say like Move DevX today is not as good as Solana, but in 3 years, I think it'll overtake it.
Really? Because you'll because my argument is that okay, Solana has better tooling, but then they're going to just like be always ahead of the curve because the difference between Solidity and the SVM is like massive, and you're going to
Yep.
get well, I would say it's like an order of magnitude better. Now, from
Yep.
the SVM to Move, how much more is there room for a third place when it comes to sort of let's say it's slightly better, like we talked about with parallelization, but do you think it's worth it to go? I want the second most performant parallelized Rust environment versus the first one.
Well, first, I'd argue that Move VM is more performant than SVM. There's obviously debates back and forth on it. So, from a technical point of view, I'd argue that Move VM is more performant. But what I would say is like, if we're looking at a 7-year landscape, I believe that EVM actually becomes third. This is what we saw in Web 2, right? Like we had like Ruby and PHP, the number ones, and quickly JavaScript dethroned it. I think Rust-based programming wins. I think SVM, Move VM, maybe neck and neck for 1 and 2. But the bet that I'm making is like there's obviously Solana and SVM are pushing for a lot of innovation, but Move has like this extensive, you have two Aptos and Suite. So obviously Solana is like SVM and one chain, but Move has this entire ecosystem around it. It's Solana, it's Sui, Aptos, Movement, and a bunch like Inisha, a bunch of the other chains that are bringing Move everywhere. So because there's much more infrastructure for Move today, it leads me to think that we may have an edge in 5 years. Obviously, I don't know how 5 years looks like, but I would say like even if it's not as good as Solana VM in 5 years, it will still be pretty good. Like if you look at React and Vue today, I would say React is still favored a little bit, but Vue is pretty good, and developers there's like millions of developers of both. So my end game is even if it's not number one, it'll still be millions of developers using it.
Yeah, I think that brings us on to another good point, which is now we're going to go down. Do you think the SVM might be bigger just because there's one version, and now we have sort of, or is there one version? Is Anchor really like a different framework than like the standard SVM? I guess. And then let's talk about the different versions of MoveVM, because there's now what, 3 different versions. I think we can get into that, but let's talk about how many
Yep.
versions of there are Solana.
Yep. So there's only two versions of Move: there's Aptos Move and Sui Move. We adopt Aptos Move, which is so DM was the original blockchain. Aptos was more analogous to the DM architecture, while Sui took a different route. So this Aptos and Sui, which I actually agree probably wasn't the best decision in the short term. Like I'm like, guys, why do we do this? But they had like different consensuses and different research patterns, so led it into a break. I think it can go two ways, right? Which is kind of what we're seeing today. Like you either have this coalition and thought process around Move as a fundamental thesis, and then you have different like libraries on top of it, right? So JavaScript or like Python, let's just take Python as an example, right? You have Python as the base languages, and you have a bunch of libraries on top of it, right? So the bull case for Move is that Move as a concept and Move as a philosophy is adopted, and then you have different libraries, which doesn't actually fragment it because if you know Aptos Move, you know Sweet Move. It's like the same thing basically. It's very similar. And if you know Sweet Move, Aptos Move. So the thesis is in 5 years there'll be developers who know both and kind of pick up 1 and 2. Even if you're a CosmWasm developer, like some of our engineers, like ex Cosmos guys, it's pretty easy to pick up. It's like some architecture is Rust based language. So I would say that fragmentation is actually not that much of a big of a difference. I would say obviously there's like beef right now, or like there's some issues there. But I think the grand scheme of things, because there's so much capital, because there's so much infrastructure and builders around Aptos, Suite, Move, whatever, there is that's actually net bullish. I would say like the SVM does a really good job with focus on product. So they're like one SVM standard, everyone adopts it, everyone follows me. But I would argue that that may or may not stifle innovation. So if you're always following what Solana Foundation says and adopts with SVM, there's no incentive for you to branch out or like innovate on SVM per se. Obviously, a fire dancer, but still under like Solana Foundation. The movie system has a lot more experimentation. You have different consensus, different execution layers, different languages. So I think it's different styles, and both will coexist.
Okay, I guess now we're going to talk about is how different is Solana's Anchor from just the SVM? Is it more of opinionated framework, or just explain the differences?
I'm not a Solana guy, so I don't want an angry Solana guy after me. But from my understanding, the SVM and Anchor, like so, the SVM uses Anchor, which is different than Rust. Vanilla Rust from like Web 2 isn't exactly analogous to Anchor, but I think it's pretty close to the point of like if you're a Rust developer in Web 2, you can understand Anchor pretty well. While Move is probably a little bit extra step to understand the Move language. Um, so I would say the SVM adopts Anchor today, but it's not directly Rust. It's still an Anchor framework.
Okay, and I guess we'll
But I'm
go
not a Solana
into
guy, so
yeah. I guess we'll go into so we're we get to the point where like Rust is good. We can agree on that. It's better than Solidity. It's more secure. But how much more differently is move Aptos move from Sui move from Solana? Like, could you sort of in percentage numbers sort of tell us the difference? Is it like a 5% difference from Sui to Aptos move?
I think you have SVM. Oh, let's start with Rust. Rust is like generic framework. SVM is probably like 3%, 5% difference than Rust itself. I would say SwiMove is the next, which is probably like 10% different than Solana or SVM. And then App Plus Move is another like 3%. So Rust, 2% additional is SVM or Anchor, like 3% or 35% move, SwiMove, and then App Plus Move is like 2% above.
And so do you
But in
think
the grand scheme of things, if you know Rust, you know everything.
yeah. Do you think having multiple different like having extra to add to Rust, do you think those features are worth it?
So, I mean, you had this in Web 2, right? So you had JavaScript, like vanilla JavaScript, which obviously from Java, whatever. Um, and then you had like React, Vue, Angular, Next, Tailwind, the list goes on, right? So there's a bunch of like add-ons, like abstractions to make developer life easier. So in the short term, like if you're a developer, like deploying a copy paste app, let's say for example, you have like a DEX and you want to deploy to 5 chains, that produces barriers to entry, of course. But in the long term, if you can build apps that are only possible with this unique framework, then it's actually not good. So my argument is that in the short term, the additional layers of complexity like obviously makes it difficult to get the copy paste developer. But in long term, you get builders that are building apps that are literally only possible with you. So for example, on Sui, we're seeing like program like builders build with PTBs, which are like programmable transaction blocks. People building with Massetti, which is a consensus. And these are apps that use the Sui technology that you can't copy paste. Whereas EVM has this issue of like it's all the same, right? If you deploy on scrolls, you can think actually not sync. You deploy on like Arbitrum Optimism, scroll maybe, you copy paste Uniswap decks and deploy in an hour, which in short term is good because you'll get 100 developers. But if you're looking at adoption for your ecosystem, it's very very difficult. And I think Cosmos actually did this pretty well. Like CosmWasm was a new framework, but you got a bunch of people that got really excited about like app chains and like I like IBC and all these abstracted concepts, and people learn the language. And people, even though most people I'm not sure like CosmWasm per se, the people like did it and built apps and infrastructure that's literally only possible with Cosmos. You had this abundance of bridging, DA layers, sequencers, all using some variants of CosmWasm, which I think long term was probably the only thing bullish about Cosmos.
From my perspective, and I've heard that CosmWasm is extremely sticky. Like people love CosmWasm. They say that
Yeah,
they've tried Move, and Move is like Rust with extra steps, and they're like, I just want like Rust with like these tiny little guards for like
yeah,
the blockchain Cosmos stuff. And so,
yeah.
what it,
I think
do?
if you're a Cosmos developer, because like what Cosmos is really good at is like you have IBC built-in modules, right? You have like Tendermint built-in clients. So if you're looking to build, like again, it's a domain-specific language, right? So if you're looking to build an app chain, looking to have interop, Cosmos is the best there. I think Move is designed for like using the underlying L1 and not experimenting beyond that.
So you don't think CosmWasm is as like sticky as or as good of an experience as Move? Is that what you guys are gauging from the Move ecosystem?
I mean, you can look at the numbers and look at the adoption. Like, you don't have to trust me. Like, I can't remember the last time anyone's talked about custom awesome. Like, I haven't actually said the word in a while. But maybe that's just a me thing, right? I think if you look at move developer count, it's rapidly increasing. Whether that's
And
because of
how
ease
much
of
is that?
access. So monthly active developers are at 7.7%. Last year was 3%.
The thing is that if you have like 20 developers and you can say, oh, we grew by 200%, but that's 20 to
Yeah.
40 devs. That's not.
It's about the number I'd be saying is like monthly active developers. It's not growth rate, it's about percentage of market share. So the numbers I only look at is percentage of market share. So like Solana's percentage of market share. So Move's first year was 3% of market share, which is like total developer pie. And
Okay.
then today it's 7.5%. And then the estimates are 13.2% next year.
And this is just is this Aptos Move or both of them?
It's just Move in general. So Aptos, Sui, Move in
Okay.
itself. We haven't
And do you
factored
know
out developers in yet.
And do you know like the ratio is that like 60-40, 70-30, 50-50?
Let me pull up. It's on the Electric Capital Developer Report. 1 second. I think let me pull it up right now so you can have it. I think
Anyway,
Sui and Aptos. So full-time developers, July 2024. Sui had around 15 more developers, but that's from July 2024, which I think Sui's like move has actually taken off like really in the last 3 months.
so you think Aptos Move is in the lead?
That's a tricky question. I would say Aptos move is in the lead from an infrastructure point of view. Like Aptos uses it, we use it, Nisha uses it. I would say it's more canonical across infrastructure because it's more modular. It's easier to pick it up and port it, and a lot of benefits of Move are coming from the Aptos Move VM. Whereas Sui, I think they're doing a good job with attracting developers to the layer one itself and getting volume there. Like even Sui meme coins right now are probably second after Solana. Um, but I don't see a Sui language proliferating outside of Sui. So I think what the EVM did really good, and it's my bet, is that EVM became popular outside of Ethereum. You had Polygon, you had Binance Smart Chain, you had Arbitrum, you had Optimism, you had insert 5 billion EVM projects, right? And that solidified EVM as the go. Whereas Move and like even SVM, you want that to be proliferated outside the chain. So even if you're building on like a layer two, a layer three, Cosmos chain, a Bitcoin chain, whatever, you should use one canonical. So we're seeing that Aptos Move being proliferated. But again, I think both will coexist, and there's actually good overlap between developers because if you know Aptos Move, it doesn't take long to pick up Sweet Move, and even if you know Sweet Move, you know Aptos Move.
Yeah. What shocks me is that like there is still like a small people who like only use CosmWasm and they swear by it, and they're like, they like do not like Move. They say it's extra.
Yeah.
They say it's complicated. And could you tell me how many developers from your end, sort of how many people you know, are previously used CosmWasm and then like switched over to Move? Any like personal anecdotes from your side? Any hires?
Oh, some of our core engineering team is like Informal Systems and Cosmos guys, and there's some of the more like talents like Mikhail, for example, was at Informal Systems, and a lot of like Polkadot migration we're seeing, where like Polkadot developers, I don't even know the Polkadot, is it Ink? I think it's similar to Rust-based programming and
Mhm.
Move. So I would say generally there is a good amount of migration from Polkadot and Cosmos to Move-based development. I'm looking at the numbers right now. The issue with Cosmos also is like is it Osmosis developer count I should look at? It's like the Cosmos Hub developer count I should look at. I think Osmosis is at 100 full-time developers, down 21% from a year last year. But yeah, how do
Yeah.
you gauge Cosmos growth? Is it Osmosis value?
Uh, it depends what you define as Cosmos. If you depend it by the SDK, then it's Go. And in that case, you
Okay.
can calculate, Go modules, the just the CosmWasm or Cosm SDK changes. But then you have like the Rust, which in Cosmos, if it's Rust, it's like CosmWasm. If it's Go, it's like the core infra. So Rust is like the preferred application
Yeah.
language. Go is the preferred infra language. So they're like pretty separated. Also, is that the case in Move? Do you guys have a preferred? Is the backend
It's
written
Rust.
in Go?
Backend's
It's all
usually
Rust.
Rust. It's Rust, and then like the smart contract is Move. Yeah, I think that the Cosmos debacle is interesting because we all know that Cosmos is like some of the best infrastructure out there, right? Like Polygon uses it, Binance uses it, Barachain uses it. Like literally every layer one, and most layer ones in production today use Cosmos SDK. Celestia is the Cosmos SDK chain. Like I'm actually a Cosmos tech bull. My thesis is Cosmos as a philosophy has won, right? It's like internet blockchains using this underlying consensus and framework to launch blockchains and app chains. Obviously, there was like issues in the culture and whatnot, and like I don't see many applications being built in CosmWasm. I don't know if you have a different experience, but like application developers getting excited about CosmWasm. I think people get excited about Cosmos philosophies. Like I'm an investor in like a bunch of IBC companies, and I believe IBC is one of the best, if not the best, secure messaging platform. And like I know Layer Zero, Wormhole, etc., working on integrating them. And like Tendermint, obviously the best way to spin up a custom Layer One today. I don't know if I count that as developers though. I mean, I count that as infra developers. I don't know if I count that towards like app developer count, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that is sort of like a point of confusion, and I do. Here's the thing: is that the CosmWasm developer community is like very small, but they're ride or die, and
Yep.
and an argument for CosmWasm, I'll be pro CosmWasm, is
Okay.
that it allows for new sort of applications that aren't Solana style or Move style, and so.
Okay.
Unlike sort of when you switch from the SVM to Move, you get like performance increases, but like you're making the same roughly DeFi security application.
Yep.
But an argument for CosmWasm is that this WASM stuff actually is like really versatile for a lot of different things that are not just DeFi applications.
What's the latest CosmWasm app that you're excited about?
The latest, there's a couple incubating on the Cosmos Hub. They're super small teams. You have Drop, which I think it's like two guys who literally wrote all of their code in CosmWasm, had made like this Atom LST, this Tia LST very, very quickly. They're sort of
Isn't that a DeFi thing though?
that
What
is
you
a
just
DeFi.
said is like you're getting pushed back. Your point was like
do it. Let's go.
CosmWasm as a language enables you to do much more cool stuff, which I actually agree with. Like I think like CosmWasm enables like native IBC and like have all the stuff, which is cool. But then you point to the point of like, okay, MoveVM only enables like more DeFi cool shit. But then the number one use case you signed is like Drop, which is LST.
Oh,
like Tia.
you said choose one. Okay, you said
Okay,
choose.
name like 3 CosmWasm apps.
Name 3 CosmWasm apps that aren't a DeFi. Damn, I can't even name 3 apps that aren't a DeFi anywhere else. I know Jake Harnell is doing some like WASM proving things.
Yeah, it's Layer. That's not. It's not. Actually, I talked to Jake about this. We need to bring him up on this. But a year ago, he was actually moved Skeptic. I met him at Gateway to Cosmos, and I was like, I'm building Cosmos, building Move, and he's like, I think Move is stupid. CosmWasm is the best. And then today's, I think Layer doesn't use CosmWasm. I think it's fully Rust.
No, yeah. It's now Rust with some WASM stuff in it, or compile.
It's like a Rust AVS. So I'm not. Didn't like that team like invent CosmWasm?
Jake is interesting. I'll say that. Yes, but also Jake in Cosmos, he's not. He's a bit controversial. Essentially, he founded Juno and then kind of.
Yeah.
He kind of did his own thing.
We don't need to get into that. But my point was like the original CosmWasm crew that tried to convince me that Move was dead and CosmWasm was good has now left CosmWasm.
Jake has left Cosmos, but you still have. Well, actually, who else founded it? It was Ethan Frey as well. And
is he still doing CosmWasm?
He's working on Layer, I'm pretty sure. With Jake,
which isn't
CosmWasm, but they love WASM.
I like WASM too. Like I like WASM too.
Yeah, they love WASM. They love Rust. I know Shane from Stargaze, like still like CosmWasm Maximus. I saw his tweet this morning. Like he's still like promoting it.
I'm gonna go put this tweet right now.
Well, the tweet, yeah.
But I again, like I think languages are not that relevant. Like not that relevant. It's about apps that are being built on top of them. Like ultimately, you build something in Solana, build something in Move, build something in Cosmos. Like it doesn't really matter. Man, it's like how you get users and acquisition. But I think like the original, like I haven't heard about an application being written in CosmWasm. Obviously, there's a lot of infrastructure that's being built, but I haven't heard recently, but I'd love to see that.
Have you heard of DAO?
I've heard that now.
It's pretty good. It's really good. I'm not sure if that's more DAO DeFi stuff.
Isn't it? Again, your whole
Yeah.
point was like, oh, SVM versus movie as DeFi,
Uh-huh.
and then you're citing DeFi stuff, which is
Yeah,
okay. I
yeah,
love DeFi.
yeah. It's just with the Wasm stuff, you get more sort of. I mean, Cosmos. I don't want to say Cosmos is like dead, but not in the greatest place. I'll tell you that.
I don't
From
think okay. It's actually a really interesting podcast.
from the
I think
application side.
Cosmos
Yeah.
Cosmos as a philosophy is one. Cosmos,
Mhm.
if you look at Cosmos like .com, whatever the URL is, it's like internet of blockchains. That's correct. You have multiple chains that roll ups, L1s, L2s, L3s, whatever you want to call it, interoperating with the universal standard and sharing security in some manner. That is like where Ethereum is today. That is where like Solana is going with their roll ups and terminal roll ups. Like Cosmos philosophy is one. The issue is that it's not going to happen with Atom or like any Cosmos asset. It's going to
Mhm.
have like they're literally just getting vapor attack to other systems. But I think Cosmos as a philosophy and the leaders of Cosmos have still were right in their thought process and now innovating elsewhere. Like Jake's on Layer, Saki's doing a bunch of stuff in Ethereum, Turin's doing stuff in Solana and Angular stuff. So like the early Cosmos leaders are now bringing it elsewhere, but the Cosmos philosophies have still struck. So I would say Cosmos wasn't a failed experiment. I think it brought a lot of the innovation that we need today, but I'm not sure about Atom if it'll exist in 3 years.
Another sort of misconception is Atom equal Cosmos. Most Cosmos people these days, I know in Marco, the SDK owner, like that was like in his bio is like, you know, uh, it was Atom does not equal Cosmos. Atom is sort of
Yeah.
it's a bit of a disgrace, uh, and and the applications. I mean the thing is like DeFi applications don't really gain traction in Cosmos because there's no liquidity. So I'm not even
Yep.
sure if it's the language itself or the technology or the application layer or smart contracting. It's just like, you know, there's no demand for DeFi, there's no liquidity. I guess
Yeah.
we're gonna now push this into sort of the new era, which is like the modular stuff coming out of like
Yes.
Celestial Land. So why build what is movement exactly? It's a L2 that uses
Move
move.
based layer 2 on Ethereum that uses Celestia for DA.
Mm-hmm. And so you guys also have a chain, another chain, right? Is there's M1 and M3 or something like that?
So the movement L2 is main L2. We have a shared sequencer called M1. We believe there's multi-chain, multi-universe of high throughput rollups and needs shared sequencing to compose state.
Mm-hmm. And so why specifically the L2? Do you think there is a moat? Do you believe in app chains or like do you think that people are going to deploy their own move app chains versus launch on movement?
I actually am pretty bullish. I think like the end game is options. Like look at I think Uniswap is the best example of this, right? Like Uniswap received like escape velocity. At a certain point, there's no sense for them to keep just being on Ethereum. There's more revenue and more mind share and more go to market and being unichain. So every major app that will ever be useful will launch their own chain. So that's the first thesis. Second thesis is that if they were to launch their own chain and you actually ever have users for this said chain, the current EVM sucks. Look at every EVM layer 2 today, it taps out like 100 TPS while Solana's kicking at a few thousand. If you're building an app chain today, you will lose the battle to Solana unless you fix something. A third thesis is that eventually, once we reach production and other people get clips and whatnot, reach production, it will become attractive to launch a high throughput rollup because A, you'll have customized block space, and then B, you'll have a Solana-like UX. So I think that's where the market is trending, where teams recognize that the apps change. Like, I don't know if I agree with it for the health of the industry. Like, I think it does introduce fragmentation and whatnot. But the truth of the matter is that it is doing that. But we need to work on interop and shared security signals, which is the Cosmos thesis, actually. Yeah, bullish app chains. I think it happens via the roll-up standard, where people don't want to worry about consensus. The biggest issue with Cosmos was inflation is really high to pay for security. With rollups, you can inherit the security via Ethereum, so you can just focus on execution.
Yeah, and so I guess your bet is movement as a sort of like an eclipse sort of style roll up, and then you don't mind if they branch off into their own app chain, but you also want them to use your sequencer. Is that sort of
Yep. It's the optimism thesis, right? Like I don't know anyone that uses optimism today, like the main chain, but then base is obviously the biggest layer too in production, and that accrues value back to optimism foundation.
Mhm. And I guess let's talk about I guess a competitor, Initia. How do you guys think about that? From is there any interoperability from movement and like I guess move chains with other sort of programming languages, like with Solidity or anything like that?
So we have an EVM interpreter that we call Fractal that compiles Solidity script to move bytecode. I like to joke that it's the worst EVM on the market today because it's not meant to be good, right? It's meant to provide backwards compatibility. If you're a Solidity developer right now that wants to be part of the moving system, you can deploy your contracts and it'll compile just fine. But I'm sure there are better EVMs like Mana and whatnot that have better, faster execution, whatnot. So I do believe in backwards compatibility. I believe that today, obviously, Move developer market share isn't there yet. So we still want to be relevant today. So any EVM contracts can run a movement with the Move EVM. But in 7 years time span, we don't envision needing that much. It's kind of like with current JavaScript SDKs, you can like current Python SDKs have compatibility with JavaScript. So like even like Fluent's working on this like blended environment to have different languages. So I think generally like having composability and support for other languages is bullish.
Hmm. And I guess let's now talk about sort of we talked about developer traction, which is going up, but how is the are there any move applications that are also gaining traction, or is it for the most part serious DeFi with Solidity on Ethereum, meme coin shittery with SVM on Solana, and like everything else is pretty much dead?
So I think it's Move has been around for like a year and a half. Solana took I would say like 5 years to get to where it is today. And okay, there's two answers to this. You can take a cynical view and just be like everything's a casino. Even like you can argue that Solana's utility today is largely meme coins and not much else. But then there's the optimistic view, which you look at Solana's deep in culture. You have like Helium and some really cool stuff being built there. There's some really cool DeFi with like Drift being built there. Um, and you can give that view. I tend to prefer the optimistic view that it's hopefully not all meme coins and there's stuff like that. Um, I think the moving system, like for movement itself, I'm really excited about Bracket, which is like this prediction markets that essentially does like swipe to earn. So not swipe to earn, but like you can swipe like Tinder and be like, okay, I believe in like Manchester versus like Arsenal, whatever, and swipe on that. So think about poly market, but smaller markets focused on like regional efforts and mobile. We have a team called Op Network that's doing a movement phone. So the biggest issue right now is like in emerging markets, access to crypto devices is pretty poor. So having like the emerging markets crypto hardware play. But I think like again, like there hasn't been a polymarket yet. There's only I would say 5 crypto apps that have escaped velocity. And I think Move will get there. And the thesis is we all want to build Facebook on chain. Why don't we use the language that Facebook built?
Hold up,
Um,
hold up. Another thing, why the Facebook Meatriding? Like, why do move people love Facebook so much? I thought they were the bad guys. Can you like go through that?
okay, that is a good conundrum. I think like yes, we're against central authorities, we're against centralized access, but I think everyone in crypto is fed up with like having no users. We've been doing this for like a while, and like we want institutions, right? Like there's two sides to the argument. Do you want BlackRock in crypto? Some people argue no, like you don't want centralized authorities. You don't want things like Circle. Some people are anti-Circle, but I'm pretty like I'm pro like this mixed centralization, decentralization, where centralized companies use decentralized software. So that's why like this whole Facebook analogy and why we meet right it per se is like Facebook literally could have built on Ethereum and just like use EVM smart contracts, or they could launch a Cosmos chain when they're doing research. But they chose to put $1 billion into R&D for the DM project because they're like the vision is so beautiful, right? It was like 1 billion users use Facebook today. The blockchain where you can have every major provider connected to your Facebook app. You can send money from New York to Thailand overnight, like instantly, basically, and basically dethrone all bad banks. If that Facebook DM vision came to life, banks would seriously be threatened. The crypto vision would be accomplished nearly, basically, but regulation struck it down. So I think for crypto to get adopted, we do have to meet right per se. We do have to like acknowledge there's a lot of innovation, and the adoption is going to still come from like the big institutions. But we have to decentralize and do it in a decentralized manner. So that's a DM project was like this beautiful mix of like a decentralized node network with Facebook's brand, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Facebook does have users. I can't lie about that. Okay,
It's
I
billion
guess.
users.
Yeah. One more attack dog question, and then I'll be more nicer. You built the first Dex on Aptos, right? Was that it in Move, or was it Sui?
It was Aptos Move, yeah.
And how does it gain any traction, or like how was that?
Well, I was in college, like 19-year-old kid. I can't imagine be a pretty good Dex builder. But I think with that, the experience that we had was it was really difficult to track liquidity. That's the Cosmos thesis, right? The first 3 months of Aptos had 30 million TVL. You can't really build a Dex that's 30 million TVL for the chain. Today, it's a lot different. Both Aptos get $1 billion in TVL, so liquidity is present. But back then, like post FTX, when everyone's like crypto is a scam, there was no liquidity anywhere. It was pretty much just Ethereum and like being like Polygon.
Yeah. Anyways, so no more skeptics questions. How has the process been building this ecosystem? Because Move, I guess, talk about whenever all the CosmWasm people were telling you move over to CosmWasm, Move is dead. Like how has been that process of like, because in my opinion, like you're the one who's breathing air into Move's relevance. Like it's just you, to be honest. Like I don't hear about anyone who's shilling it as hard as you are. So like go through that whole process.
Well, I think any company you have to survive and be big, you have to make the contrarian bet. Like even Cosmos was this, and I don't know if it still exists, but the early Cosmos leaders were like, we don't believe in Ethereum, we believe in this app chain future. And people were like, this is stupid. Why would you ever do this? And now every Ethereum person is literally building what Cosmos was preaching 5 years ago. And then I think a year and a half ago, or a year ago, I was like really interested in Rust-based programming. I was like, guys, like Facebook literally built this thing. I was Meatriding more back then actually. And I was like, dude, like there's this cool technology, like Aptos is really cool, but then everyone's like, dude, Aptos is dead, Sui is dead. It's like no one's using it, right? But I was like, no, like, but then I kept believing that like people said this about Solana too. First year of Solana, 2 years of Solana, heck, even like a year ago when Solana was like $8, people were like, Solana's dead, it's a scam, centralized chain, SBF, all this bullshit, right? And now like Solana is like potentially a thing to make us like the biggest blockchain ever, right? So I think my thesis was like back then I believed in tech, I believed in secure programming. I was really sick and tired of getting hacked. I was really sick and tired of like because I was I'm a bad smart contract engineer when I was starting off. I was like 19-year-old college kid.
Yeah. Talk about you building. Was that your first experience building anything? Was that Dex on Aptos?
No. So I was like, I've been building like Solidity for the last 5 years. I actually was doing stuff in Cosmos as well, writing CosmWasm before that. I think like I was a 16-year-old kid writing Solidity, and I could not write good code for the life of me. And that's a me thing. I'm sure there are people who can be like, oh, bad engineer, right? But I was like not really that good at engineering. I kept writing to like integer overflows, like compiled code mainnet, and there'd be vulnerabilities. Like I tried to get audited, and they charged me 50 grand, and I was like, dude, I'm a 16-year-old kid. I don't have 50 grand in my bank account. I don't know what you want me to do. So it was like very, very difficult for me to do any kind of product development. Whereas in like Web 2, like Zuckerberg, and going back to the Meatriding, like he was able to do this in his dorm room, build an app, and deploy in production in 2 weeks. You can't do that in crypto because if you deploy an app on production and you don't check it for security, you'll get hacked. Like the best example is Stars Arena, right? There was like this Avalanche SocialFi app. It was just a few devs that were random. They deployed an app, got so much traction. After Friend Tech was really Stars Arena, it got hacked from VS3, overnight hacked, gone. Now the app's dead. So because crypto is so financial oriented, security is really important. So a year ago, it's like, guys, like we're all building the same shit. We're just doing like DeFi and doing the same thing over and over again. We're not building the next Facebook. We're not building the next Twitter. Because for the 16-year-old kid to get to next level, it's impossible. So this Move thing is really cool for me because like I was able to write pretty good code. Like the Apple stacks I did a month in my dorm room, and it was in production. Like auditors looked at it and was like, yeah, this is fine. And I did that all by myself. And that DevX like really inspired me. I was like, yo, if I can do this, like me as an idiot developer can do this. Imagine this at scale. So I kept showing it. No one believed in me. Everyone's like, you're an idiot kid. Move sucks. And now everyone's like, oh wow, look at Apple Suite moves here.
Yeah, that was a great story. So I guess now movement is doing pretty well. Do you think is movement bigger than Aptos and Sui?
We haven't launched a token yet,
Yep.
so don't make any claims. I don't like Apple as an investor and us. I'm pretty friendly with Sweet guys. I think that movement, like one thing we want to do differently is we don't do like PvP. Like I think like there it actually is a really good reality where all three chains win. Where Aptos has really good like institutional connections, like for example Templeton. After Ethereum is Aptos. Sui obviously is like really sick at gaming and like the technology at Sui is insane. I think Movement excels on like community grassroots because we were builders. Cooper and I, we were early DApp builders. We were broke college kids that had nothing and still don't have much. And now able to give that experience back to builders, and people flock to us for that. So I think Movement is now going to be if the first alt VM launch coming up, and probably the biggest ecosystem for alt VM like projects. And we started as two idiot college kids, and now it's truly Movement.
Yeah, that is amazing. I was also a 16-year-old kid getting into crypto. I got into Cosmos, and people were like, "Oh my god, that sucks. It's boring.
Yeah.
It's Ethereum better." Talk about just like the founder's journey and like having that dog in you, like just like go through like a day in the life of Rushi, just like the founder lifestyle.
Yeah, so when we started off, it was like literally the week after FTX is when we started the company. So like there's literally no worse time in crypto, I think, to start a company. And we were two broke college kids, didn't have money. Every investor was like, we either were broke or the money that we have, we can't invest into like pretty much nothing. We actually started off in the avalanche system, December 2022. They're actually one of the first people thinking of alternative VMs. They were like, I want SVM subnet and move VM subnet, and they helped us out a lot starting off. And the thesis always was like, move meets EVM liquidity, because the biggest issue in Aptos was liquidity. So we wanted to bring EVM land to move, and that was always the pitch deck and the pitch line. Eventually, obviously, Avalanche had its issues, and I think now it's kind of ramping up, but liquidity is still nascent on Avalanche back then. So we're like, okay, let's bring this to Ethereum land. Let's bring this novel technology that we believe in and bring it to Ethereum liquidity, which at the time and still is the biggest liquidity hub. So that kind of got us going. I would say like when we started off, it was probably 150 no's before we heard our first yes from like investors and people. So it was actually pretty difficult, and like we were down bad. But I think because we were young, because we're just like, we believe in this, we believe in move. Like we were saying move like literally every day. And today it's crazy to see what it's become. But like eventually people are like, wow, these guys like really love move. I don't know why, but like they're like move guys. And people took early bets, and hopefully it'll pay off.
Yeah, that was great. Is there anything else you want to talk about? I feel like we're about to wrap things up. Anything else?
I think really good. I think that was good. I would love to like. There's a lot of snippets here that are pretty good. I guess like, why are you still bullish Cosmos?
Why am I still bullish Cosmos?
And what's your definition of Cosmos today?
My definition of Cosmos is a single. Ethereum has a singular view on how the world should look like, and it's Ethereum down to its rollups. Cosmos is the reverse. So actually, if you think about Ethereum as like a little dot with its solar system, you think about like Solana with its like Solana's like a fat sun. Cosmos is like nothing. It's like outer space. It is the galaxy itself, and all the little dots are like little Cosmos chains, which are planets. And so Cosmos truly is like nothing. It's the absence of a singular view, which then makes you the like center of the universe, and you can have your own planet. And just like Terra, like you can grow it and like make your own Ponzi scheme or whatever. And like if it fucking explodes, Cosmo people are like, let's go. Like that's like something happened. Who cares? So like truly no rules. And so whenever I heard about that, I was like, Polkadot is centralized. Like there's a giant what is it? A relay chain in the middle. Like I don't want that. You
Mhm.
know, with rollups, I'm like, why you pay for someone to tell you how your chain should look like, how on settlement? I feel like now Cosmos is more doing the modular stuff, which also sort of complements that as like there is no sort of final opinions on anything. Settlement is sovereign. I'm really excited about like the modular era of Cosmos. But you know, from a fundamental infrastructure side, I think Cosmos did it right. Now for
Mhm.
applications, we're still figuring that out. What was the other question?
Why are you still bullish, Cosmos?
Why am I still bullish on Cosmos? I'm bullish on Cosmos because we still have like the best technology. I think that just a simple reshuffling and product focused teams can easily beat Ethereum. Like you saw how Terra got big and it was one Cosmos chain in like
Mhm.
a year or two. Now it was a
Yep.
Ponzi scheme, but the product was there. And so I bet there's going to be a team that just like picks up something from Cosmos, puts these pieces together, and and luckily with like this new modular era, it's way cheaper. Luckily, you don't have to use CosmWasm or any of these like clunky Cosmos specific things. And so I think I'm still bullish on Cosmos. Like I'm still excited about it and you know, still in the ecosystem. So yeah.
Yep. Makes perfect sense.
Anyways, is that it? We all good?
Yeah, that's all I had.
That was good. Anyways,
That's good.
thank you. Insert whatever the podcasters say at the end of the episode, and peace.
G move.
G move.